I had just woken up from a rough night before, my face still bruised by my mother's bulky, fake golden ring. I was 7 years old, and it was the first few weeks of summer vacation. The stale, warm air lingered in my room with the fumes of metal cans and old alcohol mixed with the stench of rotting grass clippings just outside my window that stood stagnant over my bed. The decaying ceiling leaked brown over the broken and rusty radiator sitting hazardously in the corner of the room. When I finally gathered enough strength to sit up on the tattered and stained mattress, springs sticking out to tear into my arms and legs, I would still need to wait before my body could move. The soreness never left my disappointing body from lifting myself off of the cardboard sheets onto the uneven floor. Dancing around slivers and sharp cracks in the wood, I moved into the house. I crept down the hall, careful not to wake the bear, back when it was still a bear and not a rotten pile of meat gathered underneath a t-shirt. The snores shaking out of its den rode on scalding heat waves to my ears. Passing its room, a putrid scent of fungus and rot snuck out of the cracks under the door. Quickly moving away from the odor and into the main part of the house, I stopped for a second. My face was red and flushed, hair uncombed, teeth never to be brushed, still wearing the clothes I had fallen asleep in the night before, and the night before that. I hadn't yet realized at that age what life was like for most children, or that parents aren't meant to be the biggest fear in their child's life. I crept over to the ripped brown couch and sat down. I was not allowed to sit anywhere but the floor because the animals had marked that territory out of fear I would widen the rips or ruin it any more than it already was. Being that no one was awake to stop me, I turned on the television and switched the channel to early morning cartoons. As I sat back into the tattered cushions, I felt a shiver of excitement sprint across my shoulders. My eyes glowed with the reflections of vibrant characters of childhood innocence. My entire face smiled ear to ear. I savored every second of this happy and brilliant resource. I enjoyed the remainder of one show with the fragrance of stale alcohol sweeping around me. Peering behind me, my curiosity was met with a baseball glove-sized hand launching all 60 pounds of me headfirst into the hardwood coffee table. "What the fuck are you doing?" slurred the still drunk behemoth. My head bled profusely over the table and hardwood. I was too concussed to gather what I had just been hit by. Looking back, I saw the beast replacing me on the couch, angrily switching through channels. His selfishness eroded me to the bone, and I had been pushed deeper into the hole opening in my chest. The blood rushing out of my head felt hotter and hotter, like pumping lava escaping my skull. From incidents like this, I would be more upset and loathed in my sadness for some number of days, but from that morning, for whatever reason, I was infuriated. I stood up in front of the television and removed my hand from my head, letting blood pour down my face and neck. The bastard sat with his hulking stomach sticking further out of the seat than his legs did, eyes half opened and glossy. He stared at me with his mouth gaping like a fool while his dark yellow teeth begged to slip out of his mouth. His posture shook me, eating me alive. I felt the hurricane in my stomach rise to my chest and run out through my arms into my shaking fists. I could have boiled the blood off of my face. I let out, "Don't fucking touch me!" His eyes fully opened after a still second or two and his mouth clapped shut. "What did you just say?" I froze, realizing what I had done. "Don't fucking touch ya, yeah?" He slurred. "Taking up the only good spot on the couch, yeah? You fucking free rider," he sprayed. "You know something? We didn't want you. We didn't want no goddamn kid." My eyes felt like they were melting. "You know what else?" He began with another round of slurred insults. His neck and face grew tightened and red. "Your mother took 8 fucking pills, and 8 fucking months later, you're still goddamn here. We didn't try for you. We didn't want no goddamn kid."
"You said you loved me."
A regret. An amalgamation of unwanted flesh and an unloved soul. Like being pushed through a metal fence, spewing across the ground, I remember sobbing for days about what had been said to me. I never lived to outgrow those words. Here I sat under a bridge with my legs pulled to my chest, thinking of all I have lived through and for what it was worth. Nothing. It's only ever gotten worse and worse, and until now, I couldn't help it. I couldn't figure out what to actually do. I wanted to go back into that house and end them, but I was stale. I had looked into my past so deep and dug up nothing but old anxieties. I felt so dull and useless. I sat slouching under a bridge on a concrete ramp, cracked with dead grass peeking out of each separated brick. I wanted to be gone. The type of gone where after so many months no one can even afford to look for you. The lost you'd hear on the news for the next 15 years with new artist renditions of what you'd look like now, and if anyone has any information regarding the whereabouts of this missing person, please contact 1-800. That was being hopelessly optimistic. There is not a soul who would either miss me or care to stop and peek at what waterlogged carcass drifting down the river truly presented itself as. I couldn't be angry anymore. I couldn't forgive my guardians for their ironic abuse of that title, but I couldn't stir up enough rage or anger to make it worth my time to march back into that house and wreak vengeance. I was dulled. It was midday by this point, and the fumes of drying grass and old cracking asphalt filled the thick air collecting under the bridge. I laid back flat onto the elevated stone. It was firm and flat, warmed by the heat of the stagnant air. The weathered graffiti above me grabbed my attention long enough to distract me from my limitations as I drifted into sleep, and the heaviest anxiety surrounded me enough to bury me into the cement. It was a sleep I had never had before. I did not dream. I did not think. I woke up as I slept, misplaced and confused. A single dim yellow street lamp was all to provide light. I woke up to a new world, utterly dark and empty. Life had escaped the night and found refuge in nearby houses. To this new world, I felt the empty sensation of depression overflowing in my chest. The rage of loss had subsided and left a hollow feeling of guilt stuck in my mind. I rose from the underbridge ramp and walked under the nearest street lamp. I stood underneath and stared directly into its light. It was slightly flickering and pulsing different shades of dandelion yellow over me. I could stare for hours, and at the time it seemed like I had. The sun rays deeply penetrated my skin and ruined my pupils. This light merely left gray spots in my vision. How silent the earth was when felled by the great darkness of night, sinking into your skin. I felt it. The bitter, comforting sensation of ice. Packed deep into my body, I consumed the winter weather of the night and let my mind freeze solid. I felt little stimulation in every sense, and I could have sworn I was no longer alive. My body stiffened and defied every movement I could try.
Walk.
My legs budged from their frozen captivity. I had nowhere to flee to this time, so letting my stubborn feet decide our next move was fitting enough for an apathetic coward like myself. Down the thin and narrow streets of my childhood escape, and up the blood-stained sidewalk from every retreat of misfortune. The dandelion yellow of the streetlights glared at me with disgust. The deep yellow glow had shone barely bright enough to illuminate a sidewalk square. Each step was 2 away from the dark patches blotched on the gray tiling. It was the time I had to stare at my hands, fading in and out of the light. The hands of a cowardly executioner. Anything. I could do anything. I could paint the world with the tainted wine of man. I could extinguish the brooding shine of a star. I could reclaim all land pounced upon by greedy settlers and strike victory for all native inhabitants. No, this is my power. This is my strength. Who can judge the weak but the powerful? Who can write the history but the victors? Who determines the morals but the prophet? Had someone only more sane and useless gained this power, what would have become of their human condition?
What would have it become?
These hands hold both the light and the darkness, and it only depends on where I stop on this road to make my choice. There is no good, however, and just as equally, no evil. Only the conviction of moral and personal beliefs outlines what is good and right, or just as equally venomous and deplorable. That's what's left to me. This mantle of judgment begs for a sword's rend. I am useless without a hunger for justice, so I'll make the choice to extinguish the vile. So many concrete squares swept under my feet until the dread stirred again. I looked up to see myself along the back of my school. These deviant bastards tricked me once again. This body has its own prerogative away from what my mind can beg with its forceful nature. To press down this road was useless now. Whatever self-inflicted malicion was to be derived from my midnight journey had subsided. I glared at the edges of the school, looking deeply into each empty window and worn cornerstone. I started to believe everything was only made for my experience of it. This building before me exists for no one else. Generations never made their individual lives within these walls. Years never passed. Teachers never really taught. All that lies before me. And when I am gone, this world will cease to be. The indefinite determinations of humanity are best described as selfish or blatantly prejudiced. Will I ever know or care to know if today was the best day of someone else's life? Or maybe within this building, just ahead of this chain link fence, there was an example of selfless humanity, one of compassion, consideration, and condolence. Not today, not likely ever. As I lost myself in the culmination of different scars in the weathered brick, a car sped sharply behind me. Longing for something of substance to overtake my troubles, I stood unmoving against the school's fence and wait. To calculate the worth of my weight was incalculable. I knew not of the future, but with healthy estimation I guessed finally,
to shatter.
Again, the growling volume of a car echoed behind me. Grabbing my attention, I turned to see a feasting familiar speeding down the street for now a second time, and a third. It stopped at the start of the road this time, facing down on me. I stepped out from the fence to confirm my suspicions. A weathered and rusted car, still missing the right headlight, watched impatiently from atop its asphalt layer. I looked inside the cab only to make out 4 figures, missing their leader. We stood like 2 titans, one grounded in the dark night, the other basking in the faded yellowing light. All was silent but the low idle of the car, until finally the charge had begun. Those deathly tires carried soldiers of hardened voidstone down the road and into my simple being. I stood stolid and, with acceptance, received the blow.
To fly.
The screeching of rubber faded with the distant rev of an ancient engine. Against bloodied litter, metal debris, glass shards, and gore material, I began to fall under the spell of weakness. My heart defied my pleas, my lungs compressed in obstruction, my hands searched for release. The entire world collapsed under the immense weight of my heavy eyes. No motion nor life was demonstrated through my lagging figure. My wide eyes plastered to the fading skyline. A twitch of despair ran over my body. Convulsions attacked my arms and legs while my face was locked upward, blankly pondering its motions. My hands searched for release and my mind began to collapse. Scrambling, my arms flailed to find its tool. I felt my hands tighten around a sharp and jagged shard of glass as its bleeding edge rose against the night sky. I made no movements for some time, trapped in admiration and aching in every portion of my being. I admired the shiver of light that seemed to run through my fingers with its shine. Such a wondrous antique, a true piece of beauty. My hands dug the glass deep into my eye, pushing until no more could fit into my skull. Visceral explosions of blood flew from my now gaping eye socket. I lay motionless and accepting of my fate. My arms dropped to my side, my body ceased its spasms and rested against the frigid concrete and waste. Shades of gray clouded my eyes and I was carried away, formerly known as rest. Woken to a ghastly familiar voice, I felt the overwhelming presence of fate.
Child.
I opened my eyes, finding my body in the same position as before, laying naked on the dark structure's floor. Sitting up, I found the source of the sound. To my dismay, my eyes brought to me the tattered skeleton and the blackened vortex surrounding where its skull should be. Bringing myself to my feet, I stared into the realm of violet stars, now revealing itself once more through the heavy dark smog.
Is it resentment you hold for me? Or have you seen enough of your fate to realize that you are helpless to win?
Breaking my gaze, I stared at the many miles of nothing shrouded in gray overcast. Observing the dark and frivolous landscape to find some remnant of life, I was again disappointed. My eye, which had held the glass dagger so tightly, now refreshed again into another working mechanism. It spoke again. I motioned my quivering fingers to feel my eyeless face, only to stop before realizing the sensation. 1,000,000,000,000 soldiers flooded the abscess of my mind, some calling for blood, some for war, most calling for release. For vengeance, for scrutiny, for flatulence. A tear would fall down my cheek if not for the weakness it displayed.
However weak I am.
And so one tear delivered its judgment.
Do not cry in the face of your father.
The darkest bones were then raised and lowered with hideous consequence. The skeleton beat me to the ground with every defiant gathering of my strength. Crashing black, bloodied waves onto my stillborn body was the desperate yearning of a jaded combatant. Spectral extremities seeking fusion with my innards and outards smote down criminal bolts of senile toxicity. Boomed a layered voice overhead. An intimidating figure stood over my collapsed body. Its crepid hands ran across me until finding my neck, and into the air I was heaved like an unripe crop. With all my strengths I defied my eager perpetrator, after all the repugnant fruit I failed to bear. My glazed eyes stared at the embodied horror. I prepared to squeal my last words past my coarse lips.
Mercy.
The horrid bones threw my flaccid body aside. Its piercing, reddened eyes locked onto the very soul I housed, and it spoke.
You are the end, and you are the hope of the stars that rule the heavens. There is no mercy.
And with its words, the sky corrupted into a cosmos of beautiful chaos, casting out the gray and dull world. To what I could discern was me. Fight with awesome intent to meet your purpose. Overturn the sanctity of life in all effort to repeal this dreaded curse of skin. Leap through the voids of past decor. Find its cruelty within its hope. Die twice to wear the murders of both your parents. Forget your memory of birth. The rest of time will mistake you for it regardless. But if you dare seek refuge in the limp and misguided, if you dare tread the path of self-sacrifice and beautiful ignorance, then you seal the fate of 1,000,000 more millennia of men. To see the magnificence of whose body holds your conscience is the most rectifying lesson to forget. To the world, I am the universe. I am inflicted with the curse of life and with the ruin of hope and salvation. To end the drought of calamity is the only extreme to consider in the terrible landscape of living.
End this trial. And to those,
I must apologize.